So 26 years ago in the United Kingdom, the Post Office introduced a new system, a new software system. And the promise of it was that it was going to revolutionize almost every aspect of the daily operation of our post offices. And in the UK, by the way, post offices are very special. They're these little, almost family-run businesses that you have all over the country. And that system was called Horizon. Some of you from the UK will have heard of it. And almost immediately, the systems engineers who were tasked with implementing it, they were raising concerns. They found it to be buggy, potentially unreliable. There were issues. But Fujitsu, the company that made the software, they said, it's fine. It's, there's a few bugs, but probably it's most likely a whole bunch of user error. People just need to learn the system better. And the management were more or less satisfied with that. After all, they were about to implement a system that was going to bring cost savings, efficiency, return on investment, all these lovely words that we love to talk about when we talk about technology. And so things progressed. And what the postmasters, or the sub-postmasters as we call them in the UK, my wife told me I needed to explain what a sub-postmaster was. It sounds weird when I say it out loud. But what they found was that at the end of the day, when they were doing all the totting up of all the accounts and the payments and so forth that had gone in and out, there were discrepancies. And the system basically made them settle those discrepancies at the end of the day from their own money. And initially it was small amounts, and sub-postmasters were basically taking money out of their own savings and paying it off. But these discrepancies got bigger and bigger over time, and eventually what happened was that the management and the leadership of the post office thought, well, we've obviously got a whole bunch of people committing fraud because the system's right. We're being told that the system cannot lie. Therefore, the human beings involved in it are committing fraud. 900 people, 900 sub-postmasters were prosecuted, criminalized, lives were ruined, savings wiped out, people lost their homes and their jobs. Some of them went to prison. A few even took their own lives. Genuinely horrible. And sometime later, an investigative journalistic report in a magazine, a computer magazine, of all things, found that the system was at fault. Actually, there were incredible bugs in the system. Nobody really was prepared to accept that these bugs were causing the problem. Nobody really believed the people. Management were happy to believe that it was, human beings who were being dishonest, and it was an enormous scandal. At about the same time, not just in England, at about the same time in the Netherlands, the tax authorities introduced a new algorithmic approach to detecting benefit fraud. The algorithm basically flagged people with dual nationality as being at a higher risk of committing fraud. 26,000 families, many of them immigrants, were, again, criminalized, their benefits were cut, and all more or less without foundation. The Dutch government fell as a result of that, and maybe some of our Dutch colleagues, did I say Danish earlier? I always mix it up. Our Dutch colleagues will remember that. For years, dating back to the earliest implementations of new technology, governments, organizations, and institutions have had a blind spot. And that blind spot is a tendency to trust technology over people, or in this case, to trust computers over individuals. Not entirely the same, but very recently there was a research study in the UK. It was literally last month. And in the study, they talked to 500 manufacturing companies, and they asked the leaders of these companies whether they trusted the operational data that was coming from their shop floor enough to make strategic and economic decisions for their companies. 75% of them said, yeah, we do. They asked the same question of the people who are actually generating that data, the workers, the people on the shop floor, the people who are actually doing the work. Only 38% of them said, we trust the data. And it's not necessarily that the leaders of these companies are more trusting of data, although that's true. It's that they are actually experiencing almost a completely different reality of what is going on in their own companies. The people who are closest to the work trust the data that's being produced the least, and the people furthest away from it trust it the most. And the research findings were clear that these people aren't unfounded skeptics. They are displaying informed doubt. Now let's add AI into that mix. I apologize for this in advance. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn at the moment. I promise you, after today, I'm having a complete LinkedIn detox. But I've been on it a lot, mostly publicizing this event. And one thing I've noticed is that pretty much every second post on LinkedIn at the moment talks about the AI adoption gap. This idea that there is a gulf that exists between what leaders in companies want to happen with AI and what is actually happening at worker level. That somehow the tools and the systems are in place, that those cost savings, those efficiencies are just within reach, but somehow it's the workers who, either due to lack of flexibility or a desire not to see any change, that somehow they're the ones who are holding it back. The adoption gap didn't appear with ChatGPT. I think it speaks to a deeper and more deep-rooted tendency to place greater trust, as I said, in technology than in the experience and expertise and the opinions of individuals. And AI doesn't create this trust hierarchy, but it is the most powerful version of it that we've ever built. Because when AI gives you an output, it doesn't just give you a normal output, it gives you a confident output. It gives you an answer without the kind of hesitation that would normally lead to scrutiny. And when leadership is already predisposed to trust technology over the person, a system that never says, "I'm not sure," doesn't close the gap, it widens it. So here's what I'm hoping that we're going to be able to think about today. What if the adoption gap isn't a training problem? What if it's not a communication problem or a change management problem? What if it's a signal? What if the people who are not adopting are the ones who are closest to what actually breaks when you remove human judgment from a process? We've always trusted machines over the person, and AI just made that more faster, more confident, and more difficult to argue with. So the final point, and the one that I hope that we'll be able to discuss in a couple of seconds, is have we created the right conditions for humans and AI to work together? And can we be honest enough to ask, who is it we've cut out of that conversation and why? So I'd like to invite our panelists onto the stage. I'm joined by three experts. Vincent, you've already met. Come on up. I won't reintroduce Vincent because, frankly, all his qualifications make me look rather ridiculous. But Vincent, thank you very much. I'm also joined by Laurence Dinard, who is my boss. Trip onto the stage. Laurence is our Chief Growth Officer at Lyrica. She spent 8 years at Google leading AI and digital transformation across Southern Europe, leading teams of over 200 people, and before that, senior leadership roles in Coca-Cola, Danone, Cadbury. Thank you very much for agreeing for this. And then finally, we've got Steve Phillips. Steve, thank you very much. Steve is the founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Zappi, and you're also the founder of the recently launched startup CEO Friend, and some of you may have already spoken to him out in the startup village there. Steve has built his career on one specific problem, which is exploring the gap between what humans say they think and what they actually think. And he's a published expert in behavioral economics and has spent the last 30 years working out where human judgment breaks down and what to do about it. So thank you very much and welcome. So we'll kick off. Sit down now. Oh, this is nice. And I need to get my glasses out. So we'll start off by talking, each of you in turn. So Vincent, Laurent, Steve, starting with Vincent. Has anybody seen resistance to AI, especially at that worker level, turn out to be the right call?
Oh, interesting. I would say yes, especially for, so part of the problem when people want to deploy AI is that they want to deploy it with the same speed as AI itself is, acting. So what you often see is that a first reaction that I see in many companies is, oh, we should automate whatever customer service we have, like if people have questions, because these tools can obviously respond, right? Mm-hmm. And then you see that when you go into the deployment phase, that often the people who are working there, they know the intricacies of questions. They know that sometimes when a certain person asks a question, it's the same question, but it's a different context. And so when these tools get rolled out too fast, you can obviously see that it recoils and that the people who were actually sitting there saying, don't do it, had the right signal. Yeah.
Do you think that's a function of the fact that AI itself is such a transformative thing. We're expecting the process of introducing the technology to operate at the same speed as the technology itself.
Absolutely. One of the things I see when people are also I see this with myself, honestly, if I don't, hold myself, is that you get so lazy.
Yeah.
So you're like, figure it out, you know who I am.
Lazier.
Lazier, yes. And so also in these adoption trajectories, I think people are underestimating how a million different small things contribute to a big thing.
Okay. Laurence, do you have a view on this? Have you seen people's resistance to introducing these new technologies be more than just this kind of knee-jerk response, and actually something that is more credible and something we should listen to a little bit more?
Yes, actually, it reminds me of an episode that I had to live when I was in Google. So when I was in Google, actually, I was responsible. Part of my job was actually to be the intersection of sales and operation on YouTube and YouTube programmatic. So it was in 2017. And everything was going super well. So the advertisers were happy because their ads were actually put on the content that their consumers liked. The creators who were producing the videos, the channels, right, they were happy as well because they got their videos monetized. So everything was doing really well. And the YouTube programmatic was based on an algorithm which was placing the ads in a matter of milliseconds, right? So it was really efficient. And then at some point, actually this fantastic ecosystem where everybody could express themselves on YouTube, it was a reflection of a culture, it went really wrong. But what was actually interesting is that what went wrong is that we saw early signs of dangerous content, harmful content, promoting terrorism, promoting hate speech, so being produced by creators who are not well intended, moving like on YouTube, and ads being placed on these
yeah, there was a lot of stuff on the media about this.
Yes, there were a lot of signs. And then my team, they were actually really close to the customers who were actually, placing their ads. They started to actually get phone calls from their customers saying, hey, we checked actually where our ads were and so on. And so can you check again? And so they were calling, the engineers in Mountain View and so on, and said, oh, the algorithm is working as intended. And that was always actually the sentence that we got from, it's working as intended. The monetization is fine, the experience is fine, you can reassure your customers and your sales. But actually all of that cracked in March 2017, and I can really remember that because it took me nights together with my team actually to reassure the customers and so on, because people starting actually saying, no, we don't believe the algorithm. We do believe that it's wrong. We still see some ads being placed in front of hate speech, in front of terrorism. So one of these clients I remember really well in EMEA was the UK government, so not a small one. We had Johnson & Johnson as well. So they didn't want, of course, their videos were being placed against hate speech, terrorism, and so on. And so we started resisting. And the customers, as a result, resisted and removed all the investment that they had made on the platform in a matter of days and weeks. So this is where really, I saw the resistance, just not accepting the response, which was now the algorithm is working as intended, playing a big role in terms of replacing human judgment where it should be. So in a matter of a few months, we had another episode again on the, having content farms producing also harmful content with taking, Dora. If you have kids, maybe you know Spider-Man and so on. But actually saying strange things. And the algorithm was not detecting it either. So at that point, we had also like, a massive resistance from our sellers internally in Google saying, hey, we do think that the algorithm is again not working properly. And this time we were really, heard, and as a result, like YouTube, we took the right decision because we were really caring about, being ethical, doing the right thing. Put 10,000 human reviewers on top of the algorithm to look and to check the videos that were on YouTube. So without this, this skepticism of clients, of sellers, we wouldn't have, been in a good place for a long time. So just accepting the algorithm is working as intended, I would say.
And I guess the challenge there is that fundamentally the algorithm was working. It's just it was doing what it was designed to do. It's just not it wasn't nice what it was outputting, and therefore revenue was lost, right?
Yeah, actually, yes and no, because and this is where human judgment is actually beating, the algorithm in some places. The algorithm missed the context,
yes,
the cultural context. And so at that point, so now it progressed, of course, but at that point, nothing could beat the human judgment, so when you look for example, a nice video with Dora or with Spider-Man, but you pick up actually when you are human that what they say is not right, even though they look cute and the algorithm was not detecting that. So it was working as intended, but the human context, the human judgment couldn't be beaten.
Interesting. Okay, Steve.
Yeah, we see it increasingly. So Zappi is in consumer insight. And we work with very large companies like Clorox, Unilever, Pepsi, that type of company. And there's a lot of, I was thinking when you were talking, Mark, a lot of talk at the moment from teams internally, like strategy and transformation teams, saying, right, we've got to go all in on AI. And actually one of the first places they go is consumer insight because they think, aha, we can use synthetic data. And so they've started saying, oh no, let's get rid of the consumer insight department and put in, just use digital twins. That'll be fine. And it's what I work with are the teams underneath going, I'm not sure it is fine. Can we do an A/B check? Can we actually test this stuff? So it's an enthusiasm at the top to sort of change things really quickly, save lots of money, make lots of efficiencies, democratize it, and the people underneath going, no, let's do some proper tests on this. So we are definitely seeing it.
Do you think then that we're kind of in this constant cycle then where we're forging ahead with something and then almost always surprised when something horrible happens, in the case of YouTube and in what you're just saying there, with the knowledge that we can then sort it out afterwards, rather than being a little bit more thinking about it?
So I should say, in this context, I mean, and you'll know this, so the strategy teams in large companies tend to be quite small, and not necessarily that high profile. Hang out with McKinsey, do a nice big presentation. With AI, they've suddenly gone, oh my God, I can transform the company. So I'm going to be in control. So they're very politically trying to, do as much as possible and implement the AI strategy across the entire organization. So some of it is just they want to work quickly and do things quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly that.
Yeah, I think one of the key words there is companies trying to centralize things. So there's two things happening. On the one hand, they're replacing often humans with an algorithm. But on the other hand, you're replacing many diverse or different people with one algorithm. And I think so the question would be equally weird if companies would say, from now on, this person, Joe, is going to look at all of the different videos, right? Obviously, Joe is also going to do something horribly wrong. So I think it's not necessarily a fight between human versus machine, but decentralized things or centralized things. And that's why I'm pretty excited about having individual people being assisted by their own agent and having control over them might be the best of both worlds.
Because I guess in that scenario, what you're seeing is somebody who's working alongside, monitoring the output of a single system rather than trying to have a view on something that's making decisions for a whole company, which frankly none of us can do. Unless, of course, you can introduce another AI that sits above that to
Exactly.
sit above it. I mean, I'm quite curious, you know, that there is this sense that we tend to default to what the data is telling us, right? That we use that as justification to do things. I mean, Lawrence, just sort of maybe expanding a little bit, and some of your later work in Google, you know, was there any situations where the data was actually telling you one thing, but you know, and I guess you did touch on this quite a lot with, you know, what you're saying from the algorithm, but were there any other examples of where the data is indicating something quite strongly, but you know, it just didn't sort of match with the worker level experience? You know, a little bit, as I was saying with the examples, you know, the Dutch you know, scandal, the benefit scandal, very clearly, and it actually speaks a lot to what you were saying about the YouTube thing as well, which is the algorithm works, but it was giving you the wrong results without the human context and the nuance. It's not, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and actually wrong decisions are made off the back of it without that human sort of judgment layer in there.
Well, yeah, if I can use the same example as I use on YouTube. So a few months after this episode, actually, YouTube is an ecosystem. So you have creators who are trying to express themselves, to reflect the culture. In this sense, it's fantastic. Advertisers, right? And then YouTube. And actually, when these episodes that I just shared with you happen, there was a lot of fear within the YouTube system to have polemic content. So they turned extremely strongly the algorithm, which was assisting the reviewers of a video, so that there was not anymore any content which could be actually, you know, problematic. And as a result, the collateral was that the creators who were trying to produce content, so LGBTQ, for example, rights associations or news, they were banned actually from being able to monetize their content, even though they were not at all harmful, right? So the data, the result was really an issue, because we were shutting off some voices when actually the content was not problematic at all.
Right. So
when you go to
overcompensation,
extreme,
basically.
yes, absolutely.
Changing tack, and this one's to you, Vincent, to start with. You've worked with a lot of organizations, and I think, you know, in your role, see if I can remember this. I need to look up your actual thing. It's rector of, you tell me, it's rector of, rector's commissioner for AI.
That's the one.
Which means you get consulted about, you know, how to do it, basically. You know, how companies can approach it. So what do you think organizations are fundamentally misunderstanding about the systems that they are, how these systems behave? What are they getting wrong? Other than the speed thing, which we've already, you know, you've briefly touched upon, you know, is it expectation? Is it that they think there's going to be huge costs? You know, where are they getting it wrong at the moment?
I think we're stuck in the, you know, in the paradigms of how software is being bought at universities. So a lot of, or companies, a lot of people think of it as, okay, we need to buy this new software algorithm, and then we need to roll it out over the university or over the company, and then people will need to learn how to work with it. But the reality shows that every place where it actually works is because people start using it bottom up in very weird ways. And the comma in very weird ways is very important there. Which is obviously frightening for a company, right? Like, all of a sudden, you know, people working at your company are using tools in weird ways. But those are the success stories. And many of the places where it goes horribly wrong are places where they buy a tool and then they tell everyone, like, these are the people who are now going to tell you how to use the tool. So I think we really, and I know this is polarizing, honestly, but I really think we have to think of the tools as a thing that is being hired by the HR department and not by the IT department. Which means that you have all sorts of different ways of looking at it. Like an HR department knows that you have to individualize, you have to personalize, you have to think of very specific places where the thing is going to be working. But whenever I see people using that mindset and really thinking of it as we are going to assist people who are now working there with, one or many assistants that come, those are actually like bringing pretty intense, success stories.
I think there's a lot of HR professionals in the audience who are adding a couple of noughts to their budget now on the basis of that.
That they need the IT budgets now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any IT people in the room? Steve, you've got a tool which effectively is there to support growing businesses.
Yeah.
Same question, really. Where are people getting it wrong?
So I was thinking about this because I think it's a really interesting area. I think there's a misconception about what AI is compared to traditional software, right? Traditional software is deterministic. You put in 1 and you add 1 and you get 2. AI is not like that, right? It's a probabilistic mechanism. And it's brilliant, but I was going to say error-prone, but it's not error-prone. It's just the nature of being probabilistic. It's like the difference between, Newtonian physics and quantum mechanics. And so there was an analogy about model development, someone said the other day. The old models from a year and a half ago were like having 10 graduates working for you. And the models now have got so much better, it's like having 10 PhD students working for you. And someone said, no. It's like having 10 drunk PhD students working for you. And actually, it really works as a metaphor, because they're brilliant. They're brilliant, but sometimes they do and say stupid things. And you've got to know that. So if you're trying to plan, I don't know, a complicated route or road trip, you would, of course, listen to these drunken PhD students, because they're really clever, and they'll come up with interesting trips and routes. But you check it first, and you probably wouldn't let them drive. And that's really, I think, the mistake companies are making when they just sort of blandly adopt AI instead of realizing it encapsulates genius, but it is problematic simultaneously.
Drunk geniuses. And I guess the challenge is that if we look at the paradigm shift from software to AI, you learn software.
Yes.
I often joke, you used to see a few years ago in CVs, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, you might start to see, confident prompter or whatever. But the reality is you can't learn it because it's changing as quickly as you can learn it anyway. Laurence, do you have any thoughts on that? I know we spoke earlier about Salesforce and coaching.
I wanted to come back to what you said, actually, because I really concur to what you say on the, I think that we've been so used to data as a software that we sometimes, what I see in companies is that we tend to think about it's going to be the same with AI when the offer is completely different. So the offer in data software as a service is that it's going to help you to complete a decision. If you take CRM, for example, it's going to give you insight, and then you're going to make a sale, or you're going to actually, send a digital campaign, for example. When now with AI, an agent can do that. So that's the first thing. When you confuse both, don't do that, because the offer is really different. The second thing is that editors are trying to figure out is that as a result, the cost is very different, right? And so that's also a confusion that I see in many companies, is that we are moving from a pay-per-user model to a token model. Why? Because the product, the offer which is given by AI is much more complex. And the third thing that I think is something that I see also in a lot of companies is that, it's not at all, as it's not an help to do a decision, but it's doing actually complex tasks, you need to rethink completely your org chart and your culture and how you are going to think about actually your people, right? Your teams. Because AI is going to be your colleague. So how do you think about org chart? How do you think about onboarding a new AI? How do you think about retiring AI agents? So one of the most, when I'm actually still working with some scale-up, and they are really at the forefront of these kind of things, and I really enjoy the conversation with them. A few months ago, I was actually asking one of them, like, how they do think about the agents within their workforce. And they are actually like a 3,000, so it's a big scale-up, a 3,000 FT scale-up. And they were telling me that they created, during the last 6 months, 6,000 agents. But they are not all used, right? Only 2,000 are used on a regular basis. So if you add them to the current workforce that they have, 3,000, it's you can say that you have a workforce of 5,000 FT, right? But again, within these agents, the 2,000 that I'm talking about, they are not all equal. Some are used on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. Some are used hundreds of times per day. And when they were looking at actually these agents, they were only 28. So they had a very refreshing way of thinking about workforce, saying, okay, so actually I had 6,000 agent applicants for a job. And then out of the 6,000, I have, well, let's say 2,000. Well, you know, like, so some of them are doing, you know, like some intern task or like, and it's easy, and they are easy to retire. But really, I have 28 real FT, because they are, you know, like interacting hundreds of times, you know, so with other coworkers. So how do I think about this workforce? Who ultimately is going to supervise this FT, this agent, this 28? How am I going to onboard them? How am I going to evaluate them? And I found that this discussion was super refreshing.
Well, it defines almost an entirely new role for HR, doesn't it? Which is onboarding.
Because yes, because
onboarding
it's
AI.
Absolutely, because it's a role for HR, but it's also, you know, the role of people who interact with them. You know, like they need to be in a safe space also to say, okay, so but my colleague agent is not doing like a proper job, or, you know, like I think it's weird and so on. So we need also to think about, you know, giving like a space for people to also give feedback to the agents. And I found that it was really, really refreshing. I think that many companies that I'm talking with, they don't have the answer. They are trying to figure it out. But for sure, all the rules of how we work, how we make culture in a company are redefined. And we really need to think through like these questions on the hybrid workforce.
I think this is, to me, this is kind of the, you know, the theme of the conference, which is there are, many, many more questions that need to be answered than there are answered at the moment.
Yeah.
Steve, you know, I'm sort of attracted by this idea of, you know, what people think or what people say they think and what they actually think. And, you know, maybe you can explain what that means in a bit more detail. But do you think that AI is actually making that gap between people, what people say they think and what people actually think, bigger? Is it helping? Is it narrowing it?
Well, given that it's AI, it's probably doing both, right, simultaneously. So, I mean, the say-do gap is, you know, you are someone in basic market research, you ask someone, are you going to buy this product? And they say yes, and then it turns out they don't buy it, right? And they're not necessarily, people are not the best predictors of their own behavior. People are too short-term, you know, they smoke and drink and always say that they're about to quit, and, you know, and they keep doing it. So we're not terribly good at reporting our own behavior or understanding our own behavior. Of course, LLMs are trained on the internet, right? And the internet is nothing other than a list of writings about us, about ourselves. So that bias is embedded in the data that creates the LLMs that we work with. So whenever you're working with an AI system, you have to think, I mean, you have the basic model underneath, and people may not know this, but the basic algorithm at the bottom of it is not overly long, right? I mean, the Meta one leaked a few years ago, and you could print it off on, what, 4 or 5 pages of A4? It's not a long algorithm. It's a training data process, right? So everything depends on the training data. And if you train it on the internet and then you use synthetic data, which is a poorer version, a good version, but it's not as good as the original. And unfortunately, the original is not necessarily that amazing. You just have to understand that. Now, there's lots of ways of compensating for that. You can compensate it by pushing very good quality structured data at it. You can manage it through prompting. So there's lots of ways of overcoming that bias, but you have to understand what is in the base model that you start working with.
So I feel like I can get your bingo card and say garbage in, garbage out, and tick it off. Do you have a perspective on that? You know, in terms of how do we? Because basically what you're saying is that we're already working from an abstraction. The internet, the data on the internet is an abstraction of human knowledge and thought and opinion. It's already polarized. It's already a version. And then we're training models on that, and then that's reflecting back to us, and we're using that to make decisions.
Yeah, there is some secret sauce in how language models come to life, as they call it in their frontier labs. And it's true, like when you look at how they're being trained, you have 3 training steps. The first one is the big one, seeing the internet. There's 2 second ones coming up, where they teach the models to learn how to reason. You know, they're like literally learning what is a good reasoning algorithm and how do you go through that. And one of the things that I always find striking is that when you ask these models things, you do not get anything that is close to the average of the internet. When I give them like very hard math questions, I know that the average of the internet is like very bad on it. But at the end of the day, they figure out, probably through step 2 and step 3, that despite the fact that there is a lot of garbage going in, by adding these emergent behaviors of how to reason, you can actually get better outputs than the inputs that went in. And that is, in AI world, pretty magical, because we've been, you know, going around the world constantly saying you cannot get your AI better than the data you train it on. And now we're like literally seeing that these models are answering 80-year-old math questions that nowhere on the internet are being answered. So there is something secret happening here, and it's not very well understood how this actually works so well.
Okay. So I feel like we need to hone in a little bit on the so what and now what do we do bit, right? So going back to the examples I gave earlier, they weren't AI problems, but they were predicated on this idea that we fundamentally trust systems, machines, computers over individuals, human beings. And given that we are, and you can disagree with me on this if you want, but given that I feel like we're moving to a place where organizations, companies are losing those entry-level kind of skills where you learn the business, where you start to understand how it all fits together. And those skills would enable you to take a view and apply judgment to the output of AI. Given that we're going to lose that layer, arguably, what can we put in place to try and mitigate that? What steps can we take now? And by the way, this I think falls under one of the headings of questions for which there isn't necessarily an answer. So it's fine if you don't have an answer for it. But is there anything we should be doing now, thinking about now, to create the judgment layer that we need later on to enable us to properly understand whether what we're getting out of these AI models is correct? I'm going to start with you, Vincent, if you want, seeing as you're nodding.
Yeah, sure. I mean, everything you're saying, including this is one of those where the right answer is probably not known yet. It's not super clear how the workforce is changing. Like, it's one hot debate, like, are juniors going to be the first ones to be replaced or not? I do see a lot of places where there are like layoffs and like hiring stops. At the same time, I do see that a lot of the most experimental and the most, productive places are the ones where juniors are working with it. So this is probably, a tangent point where two opposite views come together. It is true that human judgment is one of the things that you learn while being on the job. And I do think that education also needs to reinvent itself and bring more emphasis to that, so that if you cannot learn it on the job, you can at least get some taste of it before you get.
So we almost need to formalize teaching judgment in a way.
Yes, absolutely.
Laurence, do you have a perspective?
So I think that we definitely need to have some rules about, ethics, and also give a space for people to give feedback. So that's really been a line from my experience on, we need to construct this safe space to be able to give feedback to what's happening and the consequences of using AI. I'm a huge believer that AI can help us if we are really, thoughtful about how we use it. So, can maybe give you an example, on sales. So, sales is one of the domain where actually AI is has one of the biggest impact. A few years ago, I tried an experiment. So, I was reviewing actually the CSAT of my customers, and in the questions that we were asking regularly the customers, there were questions about, so how is the sales force performing with you? So one of the questions were, do they understand your needs? The second question was, is the pitch simple enough? Actually, looking at that, I investigated a little bit with my team how AI could help us to be better, score better with the customers. And there was a tool which name, I don't know if you know it, it's Gong, which actually you get, the best practices of how a seller should approach a customer. You give information, data on the customer as well. And then you can improve your score. It's going to coach you, it's going to film you and to give you feedback in the middle of the pitch to say, hey, hello, you should actually spend more time asking questions to the customer to discover their needs, or, here, you should be clearer applying a free step to pitch your product. So we started actually using it, but we really thought about it because we could have actually replaced all the pitching sessions that we had weekly. Weekly, we were actually used to having, a sales manager going to their peers in a community and pitching to them, when they were preparing a big pitch for a customer and they were receiving feedback. And we knew that there were some good stuff about it, but also that the sellers sometimes they were fearing the judgment of others. So we started testing this Gong coaching on free sales, so a bit of an ABC test. One was, so sales manager were using only Gong to get coaching. One of the sales was about they are using Gong and they still do practice their pitches together with their colleagues to get feedback. And the third sale was as usual. So they just pitch to their colleagues and they get feedback. And we got really interesting results at the end of this first phase. Feedback from the customers that we were still tracking. And we saw that actually the people who were using only Gong, interestingly enough, they were much more performing on, understand the needs, check, we had an increase of 20%. Simpler pitch, yes, check, plus 10%. But interestingly enough, they had lost on another question that we started to look at, which was, I feel that we were asking the customer, I feel that my sales manager is in true proximity with me, that I can connect with him or her on a regular basis. And so we started thinking deeply about that and asking also ourselves about that. And what we concluded is that nothing beats, of course, what I forgot to mention is that the hybrid tests, the ones who are using both AI and the pitching with our colleagues, they had the best results ever. And well, we deeply thought about it, and it was because of, yes, you need to improve your technique. This is super important, but nothing will beat the power of shared experiences when you actually pitch in front of your peers and they tell you, oh, wow, this reminds me of this experience with this customer, and they shared stories. And this is actually getting into your head and to your heart and makes you better when you get to see a customer and you spend a little bit of time not just practicing art skills on how to pitch perfectly, but taking the time to say, hey, so how is your son doing? You told me last time that your son was going to high school. How is it going?
Human skills.
And your wife, yeah. And so, you know, like, so again, you know, like, so how you use these tools, not losing the judgment of nothing beats relationship is incredibly important.
Well, I think we've all had the experience, haven't we? I think if you know, it feels slightly plastic.
Yes.
If you have something that you can,
yes.
It's really hard to put your finger on, but it's the uncanny valley, right? You know, you read an email from somebody or whatever, and it just doesn't feel quite, it just feels a bit too plasticky. Stephen?
We're big fans of Gong at Zappi. We use it all the time. I think one of the things we have to remember is quite how early we are in this enormous revolution, right? So this is one of the biggest transformation any of us will go through in our lifetimes, in my view, and one of the biggest in the last 200-300 years. I mean, and can be compared to electricity, right? When they've started using electricity to the point where electricity use had changed factories and systems, was a period of like 50 years. And we're 2-3 years into this. So I think a lot of the time we're experimenting, and that's the right thing to be doing, right? We should be doing experiments and being fine if they fail. Like, test this, test that, light lots of fires in organizations. It's early days. We're talking about the future of work, and we should be talking about it, but we shouldn't expect ourselves to have worked it out yet. It's just going to take time, and that
goes back to that, you know, the expectation that we move at the pace of the technology.
Yeah.
Final question, and a quick answer, sort of a solid answer, if you will. And it's great that, you know, even though I know, I mean, we've all been very collegial, but I know there are some vague differences of opinion in terms of which we didn't really get into much. But I think we can all agree that human judgment is an essential part of making this work, getting humans into the loop. So if there's one thing that we can do now, if there's one thing that we can change now, just a simple thing to make that happen, you know, more concretely in the workplace or in businesses or in, you know, institutions, what would that be?
I can tell you what we've done at Zappi. So I used to be the CEO of Zappi. I founded it, and then it got too big, and I now just do innovation stuff. I do the fun stuff in the corner. But I started something about 3 years ago, which was called AI Everywhere, and I wanted every department to say exactly how they're going to use AI and what their plans were, and it didn't work at all. It was dreadful. And people would come back and go, yeah, AI is great. It's just not for me right now. It's just not. So then we've got a new CEO who's much better, and he's worked it out. But what I did is I set the company a goal, and I said, what I want to do is we're at, say, 300 people, 100 million. I want to get to 200 million revenue with 300 people. But I don't mind how that happens. So we've got it in the space of 4 years, we've got to double the revenue, but with no increase in headcount. So the thing that does is say to everyone there, your job's not in danger. Right? Your job's not in danger. You're absolutely fine. But it also says you've got to do twice as much work in 4 years. So you probably want to start making efficiencies with AI, because AI is the easiest way of making those efficiencies. So and setting a decent time frame around it. So it took the failure of the original one to get to the point where I think we've got something that people can get behind. People can start saying, OK, I've got time to experiment. I'm going to try it. I know I've got to get better. I know I've got to create efficiency. And improvement, not necessarily just efficiency, right? So that's one suggestion.
Solid. Thank you. Laurence? One thing. One thing.
There is no AI strategy per se. It's always related to who you want to be as a company. What is the kind of culture that you want to bring, and what is the benefit and how you want your customers to feel about you. So I do really think that, thinking about AI not only as an efficiency lever, but also thinking about how it's going to be included, again, in the workforce and how to manage, this interaction between human and AI is paramount.
I'd say joy and wonder, like let people do things with AI that make them joyful, that they love to do, that, I've talked to people here today that were very proud of small things that they were making. And I was thinking like, yeah, obviously, and you're also getting happy from it. So like bringing joy center to the work, and also like repeat to ourselves how, like the wonder of what this thing is doing. Like people tend to, build boxes around technology and be like, yeah, this is how it works. But every time I'm taking a plane, I'm like, I'm in a bullet, in the sky, and this is working. And if you think with the same kind of wonder about AI, I also think it increases the joy of working with it.
We get bored really quickly as humans, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Mad. That was genuinely fascinating. Thank you so much, each of you, for participating in this. Thank you for the preparation as well that you've done. Thank you for being here, traveling all the way from the UK. Please give it up for the panel. Thank you, everybody.